Hey, what's up, guys? It is Friday, December the 27th, 2019. I was going to show this to you. This is, if you want to go and listen to the live podcast, you can go to anchor.fm/The Kingsman Report. If you want to be like a monthly contributor, you can go on there and you can support the podcast. And if you just listen and you want to listen, leave a message, you can leave a message on there as well. So, I got a whole bunch of stuff I'm going to cover tonight. Russia has introduced their hypersonic missile that goes 27 times the speed of sound. I have news from China. I have local news. I have news from all over the place. Taking about 4 days off. I know it's supposed to be a daily podcast. So with all that being said, we can go ahead and get into it. If you want to call in live, it's that number scrolling at the bottom of your screen, 1-408-638-0968. And then you enter the meeting ID. It's 534-233-4758. And I will screen those phone calls as well. The main thing I'm going to talk about, and if you've never viewed this live, I usually go through a bunch of news articles, whether it be from here and around the world, and then I get to the main one, which is going to be the Colorado drone mystery. A bunch of drones are flying around Colorado, and nobody is taking responsibility for it. They don't think that it is a civilian doing it because the wingspan on them is up to 6 feet. The FAA doesn't know, the military doesn't know, the DEA doesn't know, nobody knows what's going on. So it's kind of a mystery on what's going on there. And they're trying to get to the bottom of that as well. So I'm going to start here in this article. I'm in Oklahoma. So So I'm in Oklahoma. This article has to do, I believe the prison that this article is mentioned in was actually one of the prisons that released a whole bunch of women. I covered an article on that. They had like a mass release of women in Oklahoma prison here. And I believe this one here, Eddie Warrior Correctional Center, is one of the ones they released a bunch of women from. I may be wrong on that, but I believe that's one of them. This article says Michael Bloomberg confirms he used prison labor to make 2020 campaign calls. So I'm going to cover a bunch of news. I've been collecting articles for last 4 days that I haven't been streaming or doing a podcast. So I'm covering some of those. I'm covering some that I've gathered today and for the past few days. So this article starts out, it says, Democratic presidential candidate and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has been exploiting prison labor to make calls on behalf of his campaign, The Intercept reported on Wednesday. It says the Bloomberg campaign contracted a call center company named Procom through a third-party vendor to conduct the calls, according to the report. Procom operates call centers in New Jersey and Oklahoma, and 2 of its Oklahoma centers operate out of prisons. A source told The Intercept that some people incarcerated at the Dr. Eddie Warrior Correctional Center, a minimum security women's prison in Oklahoma that houses one of the call centers, have made calls for the Bloomberg 2020 campaign. It says the people were required to end their calls by disclosing that the calls were paid for by the Bloomberg campaign, reporter John Washington wrote. He also said in a quote, they did not disclose, however, that they were calling from behind bars. This goes along with that wonderful 13th Amendment that we have with the cheap labor of prisoners in the pay-to-play private prison system. It says Bloomberg confirmed the report in a statement Tuesday, but said he knew nothing about the prison laborers being used to make calls on his behalf. He said, quote, immediately ended the campaign's relationship with Procom and the vendor that acquired the services. It goes on to say Bloomberg is among the pool of remaining candidates vying for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020, but he has failed to gain much traction since announcing his candidacy in November. If you want to read more in that article, all the links for the articles that I read are in the description underneath the video. If you're listening to the podcast, I also post those descriptions in the the links in the description of the podcast also. One thing this guy has been very active in, I'm going to mention this, I'm trying to get an interview with the militia in Virginia. He has been funding the Democratic candidates in Virginia. That's come out. So he is pro-gun grab, anti-Second Amendment, and he is one of the ones that is funding the confiscation of the firearms in Virginia. He's pumped a bunch of money in there. I think I read an article on that. I think maybe a couple other guys have as well. But, yeah, so if that's who you're going to vote for, good luck. So this article is kind of ominous, but if you know anything about bees and how they're beneficial to humanity, without bees we wouldn't have wouldn't have plants, basically. We wouldn't have pollinated plants. We wouldn't be able to get any of the vegetables that we need pollinated. So this just popped out, and it's crazy because in this article, these huge hornets are actually from Asia, and they're in Washington State. So it says a giant hornet has invaded Washington State, and it's hungry for honeybees. So there's at least one Asia giant hornet, largest pest of its kind, buzzing around Washington State, and it's scaring the locals silly. But it's not here to prick people. It's much hungrier for honeybees. A resident found the nearly 2-inch hornet in Blaine, a city that sits on the U.S.-Canada border, Washington State Department of Agriculture reported. It says the department took that specimen, which had died. Other residents reported seeing a live hornet buzzing near a bird feeder before escaping to a nearby forest. All wasps are scary, but this one is definitely the scariest. It's unusual to see the Asian giant hornet in Washington for a few reasons. It's never been seen in the state before, for one, and it's native to East Asia, and it's typically dormant during the winter, opting to buzz about between July and October. It says in the winter, colonies typically nest in the ground and avoid humans and pets, though when disturbed they can inflict, quote, a nasty sting, the department said. It goes on to say the hornet is likely migrated from Canada. Department spokesperson Chris McGann told CNN, and wildlife officials in British Columbia found and quickly destroyed a colony of Asian giant hornets in August. It says it seems the pest can travel far, and they've been spotted around the UK as recently as October. Nasty things aside, humans aren't the hornet's primary target. The fearsome pests are 5 times the size of honeybees, and they really can kill up to 40 bees a minute, per Purdue University Pest Tracker. Honeybees are especially easy targets when clustered in their hives. So they're not totally helpless. Entomologist Stephen Martin told Wired in 2016 that worker bees from a buzzing ball when the hornet intrudes their hive, vibrating and squeezing the hornet until they can't pump blood throughout its body anymore. Humans are much more formidable foes to hornets than bees are. So if even a stick from a hornet stings, the appearance of an Asian giant hornet in Washington isn't as scary as it seems. Though allergic reactions to their stings have killed people before, McGann said. While this isn't an intimidatingly large insect, an invasive species we want to keep out of our state, it's not cause for panic, he also said. So as if the genetically modified organisms that they're feeding us aren't killing the honeybees enough. I've had people argue with me till they're blue in the face and saying that it has nothing to do with the bees dying off, but it has a lot to do with it. This article I found interesting because all the trials with psilocybin, now they're doing LSD, obviously cannabis, MDMA. This article says doctors are now giving Alzheimer's patients LSD. I don't know. Grateful Gal asked, "Is it oranges?" It did in the article. It didn't show any pictures of it, I guess, but I would imagine it's pretty damn big. I mean, I can look at it, see if we can find it real quick. See if we can find a picture of it real quick. Yeah, I guess it is kind of. I mean, that's massive. So if you're looking at that, I mean, you can see the helmet on that thing is huge. Picture's not the greatest. There's a picture of it there. I guess it's kind of orange, kind of yellow. I mean, on my screen, it's going to look different than it looks on your screen. Oh, you're welcome. That's pretty big. Pretty big hornet. So the article says doctors are giving Alzheimer's patients LSD. It says doctors dosed nearly 50 elderly Alzheimer's patients with low doses of LSD to see if psychedelic drugs had any impact on their cognitive balance. Psychedelic drugs like LSD are a hot topic among medical researchers. Studies have indicated that it would help treat conditions like alcohol dependence and depression. A new study didn't show any signs that LSD improved Alzheimer's patients' cognitive skills, according to New Atlas, but it did provide evidence that microdosing psychedelics didn't do any harm either. That's good news, though. It says the study published last week in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. You know, I read this book, which you guys should definitely check it out. Actually got the reference from Joe Rogan's podcast. It's DMT, the spirit molecule. And whenever I first saw this word, I mean, that's pretty big. Psychopharmacology. He says was merely a phase 1 clinical trial. He says that means it was focused on more on safety than efficiency. By showing that LSD didn't actively harm the volunteer participants, and doctors may be able to move forward with the next phase of studies, which are geared towards identifying the cognitive benefits, if any, might exist of using LSD microdosing. Based on their findings, the medical researchers behind the study suspect that LSD treatments could prevent or treat brain inflammation, thereby showing or halting Alzheimer's patients, cognitive decline, and other forms of neural deterioration. The study provides reassuring safety data and opens the door for larger-scale clinical trials to evaluate the potential therapeutic effects of LSD. Robin Carhart-Harris, head of Imperial College London's Center for Psychedelic Research, told New Atlas. But the road to safe, effective medical treatments is littered with the remains of drugs that didn't make it through all the phases of clinical trials. While the new study yielded interesting results, it's only the first of many steps along the way towards government approval. If you don't know, I think Colorado you can get psilocybin mushrooms to treat certain PTSD, depression. And now it looks like they're moving to LSD. I know, I did a research on the LSD trials, and I did a video that had to do with MK Ultra, and they actually it talked about how they were trying to do LSD trials, and a bunch of it, I guess, got stolen from a laboratory and then spread out everywhere, and that's how it got into UC Berkeley and in different colleges on the West Coast, and then traveled around the United States. So it looks like, according to this article, if they get their wish, these autonomous vehicles might be getting through the production line without steering wheels, or maybe even brake pads, or not brake pads, but I guess a brake pedal. So this article says GM requests green light to ditch steering wheel in its self-driving cars, and this is from Digital Trends. I guess I can play the article for you guys, or the video for you guys, and kind of show you what they're talking about here. But I gotta be careful. So the article goes on to say, climb into a self-driving car today and there might be a steering wheel right where you'd expect, and probably a backup driver too, ready to step in should something go awry during the journey, but not for long. Cruise, the autonomous car unit of General Motors, wants to start testing its self-driving car's sans steering wheel. It says, indeed, it's already produced a video that I just showed you guys above. It says, current National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA regulations, which were created at a time when self-driving cars were the stuff of science fiction, mean that vehicles have to include essential safety features such as steering wheel and brake pedal. But the emergence of robot cars has put these rules under the spotlight. According to the recent Reuters report, the NHTSA has confirmed it's in talks with GM, which is asking for permission to test a limited number of autonomous cars without steering wheels or any other type of manual controls. GM has raised the idea that the NHTSA at the beginning of 2018, and last week James Owens, the agency acting administrator, appeared to be warming to the idea. I expect we're going to be able to move forward with these petitions soon as we can, Owens told Reuters, adding it would be, quote, it would definitely arrive at a decision sometime next year. He described the removal of manual controls from self-driving cars as, quote, a big deal, because it would be the first time for such action to be taken, marking a major milestone in road autonomous cars. The U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, who has been discussing GM's petition with the NHTSA, sounded a note of caution, noting how a number of occasions autonomous car companies have had to reevaluate their ambitious plans. Even GM said recently that it would have to delay the launch of a proposed robo-taxi service because its technology isn't quite ready. I think the complexity was far greater than what a lot of very optimistic advocates were thinking, Chow told Reuters. So Waymo, another leader in the field of autonomous cars, has also asked the NHTSA to remove requirements for steering wheels. The NHTSA should move promptly to remove barriers while ensuring safety, Waymo said in a letter that was submitted over the summer as part of a public comment period on the rules of self-driving vehicles. At the present time, autonomous vehicles use modified versions of existing manual models, such as Waymo's Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivan, with the factory-installed steering wheels left in place. But in an early test of this technology, Alphabet-owned Waymo uses a custom-built car dubbed the Firefly. So Alphabet-owned, it's Google. It says the vehicle was originally designed without any manual controls, but Waymo had to add a steering wheel and a brake pedal to comply with current regulations. Ditching the steering wheel and the pedals would create additional space for allowing for a more creatively design interiors. Creatively design interiors. You can go on and read more if you want to about this article. But one thing I've noticed, as far as this goes, Tesla's not removing their steering wheel from anything. I would kind of follow Tesla's lead on that. Kind of reminds me of iRobot when he's driving through the tunnel. I don't think. Grateful Gal said, what could possibly go wrong with this idea? I imagine a whole bunch of stuff. Like I was going to say, it reminds me of iRobot when he's speeding down the tunnel and he always wants to put it, or always take it off autopilot, and he's like wrecking everywhere and everyone keeps warning him not to do it. I wouldn't put I would continue to put steering wheels inside of it, but I'm not a tech guru, so. This article, I read a prior article that some jerk-off was putting PNGs on the Epilepsy Foundation's Twitter account. The only time that anyone went to the Epilepsy Foundation's Twitter account and they were exposed to PNGs, it was throwing people into seizures. And then some guy who was an ex-Marine got upset with the guy that runs the Epilepsy Foundation and the Twitter account. And he sent him an email, and it had a PNG in it, and as soon as he opened it, it set him into an epileptic seizure. And I think the guy was inevitably charged with that crime for doing it to the guy. So now, Twitter. This article says Twitter blocks animated PNGs to keep trolls from using them to trigger seizures. So this is updated from the other article. It says Twitter will no longer animate PNG files for trolls hacked after trolls hacked the Epilepsy Foundation handle and hashtags last month to send potentially seizure-inducing images into epileptic and photosensitive individuals. The company says it recently discovered a bug that had allowed people to add multiple animated images to a tweet and bypass Twitter's autoplay protections using the file format. That said, Twitter also says it isn't aware that anyone used a PNG to try and trigger seizures. It just wants to avoid the possibility that people do so in the future. We want everyone to have a safe experience on Twitter, the company said in a tweet. APNGs were fun, but they don't respect autoplay settings, so we're removing the ability to add them to tweets. This is for the safety of people with sensitivity to motion and flashing imagery, includes those with epilepsy. Twitter also said APNGs used up a lot of data and could in some circumstances cause app crashes. To be clear, you'll still be able to add animated images to your tweets. You'll just need to fall back on GIFs. Excuse me. Since most people already use GIFs as their go-to for sharing clips and reactions, the update is unlikely to change how the majority use the platform. To make up for the loss of the added functionality that comes with APNGs, Twitter says it's working on adding alt text to GIFs, which will help make them more accessible to people who depend on screen readers to navigate the internet. It's also looking into building a similar feature that's better for you and your Twitter experience. The move probably won't make Twitter completely safe for photosensitive individuals, since trolls have used GIFs in the past to try to harm people. However, the fact that APNGs were able to bypass the site autoplay protections made them particularly susceptible to abuse. So this is an update. It says, this is basically out of the one that I previously read. But thank goodness for the guy's spouse was there with him whenever he opened the email, and that set him into the epileptic seizure. She was also a nurse or a doctor, and she was able to call 911, so he didn't die from it, but the guy was still charged accordingly. I mean, I don't know what kind of a-hole does that. I mean, I guess everybody kind of preys on everyone's weaknesses. So I talk a lot about artificial intelligence, and this article says, forget tanks, the Army's most powerful weapon will be AI. So it goes on to say, envision a scenario wherein dismounted infantry soldiers are taking heavy enemy fire while clearing buildings amid intense urban combat. When an overhead drone detects small groups of enemy fighters hidden nearby, between walls preparing to ambush. As the armed soldiers clear the rooms and transition from house to house in a firefight, how quickly would they need to know that group of enemies awaited them from the next corner? Getting this information to soldiers in seconds can not only decide victory or defeat in a given battle, but save lives. What if AI-enabled computer programs are able to instantly discern specifics regarding the threat such as a location, weapons, and affiliation by performing real-time analysis on drone feeds and other fast-moving sources of information, instantly sending crucial data to soldiers in combat? While current technology can today perform some of these functions, what if this data was provided to individual dismounted soldiers in a matter of seconds and instantly networked? Operating in a matter of milliseconds, AI-empowered computer algorithms could balance new information of vast databases of previously compiled data to make these distinctions, instantly informing soldiers caught in the crossfire. The use of autonomy will assist in assimilating data from these various systems and quickly provide useful options to command decision makers, including individual soldiers. Over time, more and more new intelligent technologies will be introduced. Dr. J. Cord Lane, Director of Human Research and Engineering, Directorate, CCDC Army Research Laboratory, told Warrior in a written statement. Much of this work centered upon near and far-term applications of AI is being done with the ARL's Cognition and Neuroergonomics Collaborative Technology Alliance. Army scientists and many of its industry partners rest the entirety of this conceptual approach upon key premise that AI and autonomy are intended to massively improve the soldier decision-making process, not displace the crucial and much-needed faculties unique to human cognition. The idea is to have AI-enabled technical systems perform instant procedural functions able to instantly inform humans operating in role of command and control. The Army calls this overall process, quote, soldier as a system. Sorry. It says specifically this means a single electronic architecture will connect night vision goggles, individual weapon sights, wearable computers, and handheld devices, showing moving digital maps and time-critical intelligence data. Information from all these otherwise separate soldier technologies, which can also include acoustic and optical sensors or mobile power sources such as batteries, is naturally independent and interwoven in crucial battlefield circumstances. Therefore, an ability to use various applications of autonomy and AI to create instant information sharing in war changes the tactical and strategic circumstances confronted by individual soldiers, massively improving prospects for survival. The Army is now discussing various technologies and innovations which a handful of industry partners, one such example is Booz Allen Hamilton, a vendor who has been working on a related program called, quote, Digital Soldier. The system, as described by Booz Allen Hamilton developers, is similarly based upon the concept of creating an overall system of technical apparatus through which to better connect soldier technologies in war. We have created some algorithms that can recognize a human and video feed and recognize the action they are taking. We can see someone who has raised a weapon immediately, cue a heads-up display, or drone flying in the area. Joe Dillon, Vice President of Soldier Solution, Booz Allen Hamilton, told Warrior. So I've warned about TikTok, and I've talked about there's another one I've never even heard of, 2Talk or something like that. Now we're getting warnings from the military that's telling people don't use TikTok, and I've told people that it's basically just scanning your face and putting your facial scans in a facial recognition hive somewhere where they're keeping all the information about you, along with your biometric scans on your phone and your face scans on your phone. So now the Navy is telling the Navy has come out and said TikTok is banned by Navy amid growing data and privacy concerns. It says Army and Navy want personnel to delete TikTok from work devices, citing national security concerns. Former senior advisor in the State Department, senior fellow at Center for Digital Government and Cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright discusses Boeing U.S.-China trade relations and whether Chinese-based social media app TikTok is a national security threat. So the popular short-form video platform TikTok has been banned by the Navy, and the Naval Network Warfare Command released an awareness bulletin through its Navy Marine Corps intranet, directing employees not to install or uninstall the app from government-furnished mobile devices like iPhones and iPads. It says this decision was made based on cybersecurity threat assessments. CDR Dave Benham, Director of Public Affairs for U.S. Fleet Cyber Command and U.S. 10th Fleet, said in a statement to Fox Business. He said the move is, quote, consistent with 10th Fleet efforts to proactively address existing and emerging threats in defense of our networks. In November, TikTok's Chinese connection became a point of contention at State Judiciary Subcommittee hearing after the U.S. government launched a national security review of its parent company, TikTok, ByteDance, in late October. The review, how corporations and big tech leave our data exposed to criminals, China, and other bad actors, was set to determine if privacy laws like storing U.S. user data in China and removing content at the request of Chinese government were broken. If you don't know what TikTok is, you should, Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, who chaired the hearing, said, calling the company a Chinese-owned social media platform so popular among teens that Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly spooked. The company compromised of the Chinese Communist Party knows where your children are, he added, and quote, knows what they look like, what their voices sound like, and what they're watching and what they share. The latest move away from TikTok comes as the company is looking to move away from its ties to China to escape this bad image linked with the country. The brand does not have a main hub, but top executives work mostly from Singapore, per the Wall Street Journal. Several reports, including an extensive investigation from The Guardian, show TikTok officials censored content that did not agree with the Chinese government, like posts that mentioned Tibetan independence or Falun Gong, a religious group banned in the country. This is a company spokesperson told Fox Business that the company could help TikTok enter bigger markets in Southeast Asia, Europe, or the United States. We have been very clear that the best way to compete in markets around the globe is to empower local teams. TikTok has steadily built out its management in the countries where it operates. The social network has exploded into popularity since 2017 from Musical.ly, a similar company that let users lip-sync popular songs, when it was purchased from and rebranded as TikTok. Global downloads have outpaced that of Instagram and Snapchat, according to mobile data firm App Annie. It goes on to say it had a whopping 665 million monthly active users in October. Yeah, I think Mark Zuckerberg didn't want to have this app in the country because he said it was detrimental to our democracy. So that was one reason why he was, because initially he tried to acquire musical.ly. He wasn't able to. It was acquired by somebody else. And now because I guess he doesn't have access to his data breach company, Facebook, that he thinks is detrimental to our democracy. If you're using it, just delete it. That's all. I mean, that's all I can say. I've done multiple live podcast videos where it talks about various apps that are secretly gathering your data. The most popular one is going to be a flashlight that you download. Although your phone automatically comes with a flashlight capability. Anyways, people download it all the time, and those are the ones that tend to steal your data the most. So here's another one from the Pentagon. It says, Pentagon tells military personnel not to use at-home DNA tests. This is another one that I warned about maybe a month ago. I said that the information that you're putting in these at-home DNA kits are being sold. A lot of people don't believe it. I read articles about it, and now the Pentagon is telling military personnel not to use at-home DNA kits. So if the government is telling military personnel not to do it, you probably shouldn't do it either. They're obviously warning them for some reason. So they're telling them don't use any software or apps that have to do anything with facial recognition software. Don't submit your DNA to 23andMe. What's the other one called? Ancestry.com. Don't give your DNA to anyone. Don't use facial recognition software. Type in a PIN to unlock your phone. Don't use your fingerprint. Don't use your face to undo it. Go back to just doing it the way, I mean, we did it at the beginning, because all of this stuff is gathering intel on all of us. So the article goes on to say, senior Pentagon officials have told members of the armed forces to skip what may seem like a perfect holiday gift, an at-home DNA test. In a December 20th memo obtained by NBC News, Under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Joseph Kernan and James Stewart, acting Under Secretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, said that DNA testing companies were targeting military members with discounts and other undisclosed incentives. Tests that provide health information have varying levels of validity, and many are not reviewed by the Food and Drug Administration before they are offered, the memo said. The tests might be sold without independent confirmation of their claims, the official said, a fact that poses more risk to military members than regular consumers. Inaccuracies could negatively affect the required disclosure of those members' medical information, the memo said. Says, moreover, there is an increased concern in the scientific community that outside parties are exploiting the use of genetic materials for questionable purposes, including mass surveillance. And this was in the article that wasn't to military personnel. This is just an article that leaked that was for the average consumer. That they were selling any of the data that you're sending in there, any of that stuff, anything that has to do with your genetic, they're gathering it, and it's all going to a database. It's all sold in the black market, and you're targeted. It says, and the ability to track individuals without their authorization or awareness, the memo said. The officials told military personnel to refrain from using the kits until otherwise notified. One DNA testing company, 23andMe, told NBC News in a statement that it takes the, quote, utmost efforts to protect consumer privacy and ensures highly accurate results that have been authorized by government regulators. I doubt that. The company added that it doesn't share information with third parties without explicit consent forms. Another company, Ancestry.com, also said that it doesn't share data with insurance companies or employers. But consumer advocates have cautioned the tens of millions of people who have used at-home DNA kits to always take a close look at the agreements that the companies require. Maybe you're doing it for fun or laughs, or for a conversation at the holiday table. But at the end of the day, you may have a good time, but the company now can sell the information 100 different ways. Peter Pitts of the Center for Medicine and the Public Interest told NBC News. You don't want that information displayed to other people, he added. Ultimately, you don't want an employer to have access to your information. I've read about this, and I've read multiple articles about them selling your information. But I just read news that everyone ignores, and you can take it with a grain of salt. And you can choose to buy it or you choose not to buy it. I mean, it's up to you, completely up to you. This article is from the National Interest. It says America's B-21 Raiders new stealth bomber is going to change how America fights air wars. As the Air Force's stealthy long-range bomber will have the endurance and next-generation stealth capability to elude the most advanced existing air defenses and attack anywhere in the world, if indeed senior services officials said. When the Air Force revealed its first artist rendering of what its new long-range strike bomber looks like, former Air Force Secretary Deborah James made reference to plans to engineer a bomber able to elude detection from even the best, most cutting-edge enemy air defenses. Our fifth-generation global precision attack platform will give our country a network sensor shooter capability, enabling us to hold targets at risk anywhere in the world in a way that our adversaries have never seen, James said when revealing the image last year. However, while Air Force developers say the emerging B-21 will introduce new stealth technologies better suited to elude cutting-edge air defenses, Russian media reports have recently claimed that stealth technology is useless against their air defenses, and this is going to be an article I'm about to come up with because they just released their hypersonic that's capable of going 27 times the speed of sound. This is Russia built the S-300 and S-400 air defenses are believed to be among the best in the world. In addition, the National Interest has reported that Russia is now working on an S-500 system able to destroy even stealthy targets at distances up to 125 miles. Nevertheless, James added that the new bomber will be able to, quote, play against the real threats. Although official details about the B-21 are, quite naturally, not available, some observers have pointed out that early graphic rendering of the plane does not show exhaust pipes at all. This could mean the Air Force has found a new method of releasing fumes or reducing the heat signature from new stealth plane. The new bomber, called the B-21, was formerly named the Raider through a formal naming competition involving members of the Air Force, their families, and other participants. The Air Force has awarded a production contract to Northrop Grumman to engineer its new bomber. The LRS-B will be the next generation stealth aircraft designed to introduce new stealth technology and fly alongside and ultimately replace the service's existing B-2 bomber. The LRS-B, I can take off from the continental United States and fly for a very long way. I don't have to worry about getting permission to land at another base or worry about having somebody try to target the aircraft. It will provide a long-reach capability, Lieutenant General Bunch, Air Force Military Deputy for Acquisition, told Scout Warrior in an interview last year. The service plans to field a new bomber by the mid-2020s. The Air Force's plans to acquire many as 80 to 100 new bombers for a price of roughly $550 million per plane in 2010 per plane in 2010 dollars, Air Force leaders have said. Although there is not much publicly available information when it comes to stealth technology, industry sources have explained that the LRS-B is being designed to elude the world's most advanced radar systems. For instance, lower frequency surveillance radars allow enemy air defenses to know that an aircraft is in the vicinity, and higher frequency engagement radars allow integrated air defenses to target a fast-moving aircraft. The concept with new bomber is to engineer a next-generation stealth configuration able to evade both surveillance and engagement radar technologies. The idea is to design a bomber able to fly, operate, and strike anywhere in the world without an enemy even knowing an aircraft is there. This was the intention of the original B-2 bomber, which functioned in the capacity for many years, until technology advances in air defense made it harder for it to avoid detection completely. The new aircraft is being engineered to evade increasingly sophisticated air defenses, which now use faster processors, digital networking, and sensors to track even stealthy aircraft on a wider range of frequencies at longer ranges. These frequencies include UHF, VHF, and X-band, among others. If you want to read more about that, links in the description. If you want to call in live, the number scrolling across the bottom of the screen, 1-408-638-0968. And enter the meeting ID is 534-233-4758. This article, I'm not going to, probably not going to read all into it. But it says a nuclear attack would most likely target one of 6 U.S. cities, and simulated images show how a Hiroshima-like explosion would affect each. So if you want to go in here, I take the articles and I pull them onto the paper so it cuts out all the ads and stuff. But if you want to go on here, it shows a map, and it'll tell you like the orange here. It says thermal radiation. It gives you the radius right here. It says people caught within this radius could experience third-degree burn, severe scarring, or disablement, and it gives you all the information there. So if you want to look more into that, the link's in the description. This article is from news.com. It says, Secret Sub reveals China's chilling plan. It says, in September, the Indian Navy evicted the Chinese survey ship Cheyenne-1 for intruding upon its exclusive economic zone. It was sailing among the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands without permission, and such survey ships mapped the ocean floor for just 2 purposes, military or economic. Seeking oil, gas, or significant resources deposited inside the Indian waters would be cheap. Exactly why China would be interested in these islands can be inferred by the proximity of, this Malacca Strait. A narrow channel is naturally a choke point for the most of Asia's trade and fuel supplies. If any future conflict, knowledge of the water surrounding it would be a matter of victory or defeat, and that fight would be on Australia's doorstep. The Cheyenne-1 was highly visible intrusion into the Indian waters. International shipping has freedom of navigation through such economic zones, but they cannot do whatever they want. India's Chief of Navy, Admiral Karambir Singh, recently told media a survey ship was operating there without permission. Our stance has been that if you do anything in our region, you have to notify us or get permission, he said. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Just 10 years ago, China's People's Liberation Army, or the PLAN, P-L-A-N, seldom visited the region. Now India says some 8 to 10 ships and submarines were found there each year. Since 2012, Beijing has been sending regular submarine patrols into the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal. India says it has been finding between 3 and 4 of them every 3 months. It's a sign of things to come, warns Institute of South Asia Studies research fellow Yosoge Joshi. He said, and I quote, the Andaman Sea is slowly but surely becoming a crucial battlefront. While this does not necessarily imply the clash between the 2 navies is inevitable, the waters around the Andaman Sea will see the 2 navies jolting more frequently than in the past. Whoever controls the Andaman Sea controls the Malacca Strait, and whoever controls the Malacca Strait has a chokehold on the lateral flow of oil tankers, grain ships, and bulk cargo carriers supplying the whole Western Pacific, in particular China. China's economy relies heavily on sea lanes of communication passing through the waterway. It therefore fears a situation where hostile powers could interdict these vital economic lifelines. To mitigate this, Beijing began work on an important deep-sea port in Myanmar, and a new rail network was to link it to the Chinese province of Yunnan. These projects are now in doubt. Beijing continues, however, to fund massive canal project to link the Andaman Sea to the Gulf of Thailand. While both projects bypass Malacca Strait, India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands remain astride in the routes any shipping must take into the Indian Ocean. And China's been busy establishing a presence in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. I'm not going to read all that if you guys want to look into it. I'm going to get more into the important stuff. This article says Russia commissions intercontinental hypersonic weapon. I don't know if we have anything like this, but obviously they sure do. So it says Russia's defense minister reported to President Vladimir Putin that a new hypersonic weapon of intercontinental range became operational Friday following years of tests. Defense Minister Sergei informed Putin that the first missile unit equipped with the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle entered combat duty, the defense ministry said. Putin unveiled the Avangard among other prospective weapon systems in a State of the Nation address in March 2018, noting that its ability to make sharp maneuvers on its way to a target will render missile defenses useless. The Russian leader described the Avangard's creation as a technological breakthrough comparable to the 1957 Soviet launch of the first satellite. Earlier this week, Putin emphasized that Russia is the only country armed with hypersonic weapons, and he noted that for the first time in history, Russia is now leading the world in developing an entire new class of weapons, unlike in the past where it was catching up with the United States. The military said that the Avangard is capable of flying 27 times faster than the speed of sound, and Russian media reports indicated that the Avangard will first be mounted on a Soviet-built RS-18B intercontinental ballistic missiles, codenamed SS-19 by NATO. It is expected to be fitted to the prospective Samoret intercontinental ballistic missile after it becomes operational. The Defense Ministry said last month that it demonstrates the Avangard to a team of U.S. inspectors as a part of transparency measures under the New START nuclear arms treaty with the U.S. The U.S. has mulled new defense strategies to counter hypersonic weapons developed by Russia and China. U.S. officials have talked about putting a layer of sensors in space to more quickly detect enemy missiles, particularly the hypersonic weapons. The administration also plans to study the idea of bashing interceptors in space so the U.S. can strike incoming enemy missiles during the first minutes of flight when the booster engines are still burning. Pentagon has also been working on the development of hypersonic weapons in recent years, and the Defense Secretary Mark Esper said in August that he believes, quote, it's probably a matter of a couple of years before the U.S. has one. He has called it a priority as the military works to develop new long-range fire capabilities. Hey, what's up, Chuck? Man, what's crazy is I'm guessing because Chuck put in the comments the TR3B, which is the TR3B Astra. It's a triangle shaped. Not a whole lot of people know about it, but it's a stealth fighter that was built during the same time as our stealth bombers, and it's triangle shaped with 3 lights on each corner. And it has a ball or a globe that lights up. And they say, and I don't know if this is true, but they say that it can that it bends space and time, that it's interdimensional aircraft. So to even think we had that technology, I mean, it may be a possibility. Happy New Year to you too, Chuck. See, in this 22 to 60 trillion lost black budget money that Chuck is talking about here, I think the creation of the Space Force is probably just a way to publicly dispose of that money so that nobody asks questions. So we've just created a 5th branch of the military, and that's why, so that we don't have to have black budgets anymore, although there is some. And, you know, I've quoted Ben Rich on here before. I've talked about him. One of his quotes, it says, anything that you can imagine that you've seen in the movies. that we've been there and done that, or that we figured out that it's not worth it and that it's in the desert. So I think that we have a lot of things going on with the black budgets. But Stephen Greer is like expert on all that stuff. If you guys don't know who Stephen Greer is, go check him out. I learned about the TR3B Astra. I think it was from Alex Jones. But if you don't like, because everyone's saying, oh, I see all these all these pictures on my Facebook, and people are like, oh, look, it's a UFO, or it's this, or it's that. I'm like, and they show pictures of it, or the pictures of these triangle spacecrafts that are flying by the International Space Station. You know what a TR3B is? All you got to look up is a TR3B Astra. It's on there. I agree with Grateful Gal too. She says we're paying for their madness. Look, and this is another thing, because people will say, "Oh, we're gonna get alien invasion," and then I quote Wilmer von Braun, when he talks about the fake alien invasion, he talks about all these. We create enemies out of people, and then we use this creation of these enemies to go and incite wars all over the country, whether it's to get their natural resources, their oil, their gold, whatever it is. So we do all those things. And then he said the last thing that we would do is the fake alien invasion. Well, if you look at the video that I did on the Project Bluebeam, they have drones that can shoot laser beams out that project a fleet of aircraft way over somewhere else than where they're at. And they can fool anybody. They can fool their enemy. It actually shows up on radar, because these things are so realistic. If one were staying right here or sitting where I'm at, you would think it was me sitting here. And that's pretty much where we're at right now. Like the technology, anything that they've said that we've had 50 years ago, we've already had it. Like so think they said 50 years ago we've had this. Well, think 50 years ahead of what they say we have. They're way beyond that. So you can go past. What was the dude, Chuck, you probably know, the guy that worked for Area 51, or he worked for an area, I can't think of his name. He has a thing on Netflix as well. I can't think of his name. Anyways, where he had to go out there and reverse engineer all these alien spacecrafts, and they said that they found some from a geological dig, that they've commandeered some of them, and that he was out there to reverse engineer these spacecrafts. Yes, Bob. Yes, Bob Lazar. That's right. And then he got some of that chemical out of there, that rock or whatever out of there, and then he was raided multiple times because they thought the feds thought that he actually had that stuff, which I mean he could have. But I think that we're way more advanced than what they tell us. Like even our cell phones. If they didn't need us to have these, they wouldn't have given them to us. But you put a cell phone in everybody's hands, you're easily tracked. I mean, that's just how it is. You don't necessarily need a chip in your hand per se. But we got this basically a computer in our hand or in our pocket, and it tracks everything we do. That's where I think we're at. I think that we're fooled and we have the wool pulling over our eyes because they think we're just some dumbed down sheeple that aren't bright enough to realize that they have the power. Chuck says he was a spook. There's definitely something up with it. And if you haven't watched his documentary on Netflix, it's Bob Lazar, and something has to do with the desert, but it's absolutely crazy. The guy said that in another interview I think I watched on YouTube, the guy said that he was shot at. But I mean, who knows? I think, like I keep saying, I think that we're way further advanced than what they tell us. I think that they're just, we're being lied to. Honestly, is what I think. I think we're just being lied to. Yeah, I think it is Bob Lazar. have to look that up because I watched it not too long ago. But people were definitely being lied to. So if anyone pays attention to like biblical prophecy or what's going on over there, like I follow Torah. I read the instructions. Everyone would be like, "Oh, you're covered in tattoos." I got these tattoos before all that. But I'm gonna say this: like I've seen videos where, and it doesn't make me anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, where I've seen Israeli soldiers shoot Palestinian teenagers in the back. I've seen them walk young kids down the street blindfolded at gunpoint. All that crap. So I cover a lot of stuff that has to do with Israel. Yeah, he owns a independently owned. He wouldn't be able to do what he's doing without government contract of some sort because he does some sort of engineering, I guess, that has to do with chemicals, nuclear chemicals, something. Where's it at? Like Massachusetts or something. I may be totally off. Right? I watched too many documentaries. So this article here says Afghan mercenaries threaten Israel. Final target is in Golan. It says Iranian recruited Afghans affiliated with a group. I'm not even going to say their name here because I don't promote this garbage. I'll highlight it for you guys there, though. It said posted a video on Tuesday showing them near Golan Heights and claiming that they had to fight, quote, Zionists. And this group are a group of Afghan Shiites recruited by the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to fight in Syria on the side of the Syrian regime. They have played a key role in some of the battles near Palmyra, and they're now continuing to train live in Syria. The video was posted on a Twitter account affiliated with this said group, and links to a longer version of the documentary about the role of the Afghans in Syria. It is mostly propaganda film about how they come to fight this other group I'm not going to say, because that'll give me a boot, and save Shiite sites. The longer online version is not centered on Israel as much as as the 1-minute clip they posted to Twitter, and the clip shows them near the Golan Heights and claiming that their final target is Israel. So I'm going to say this about this article. Does anybody know, that's watching this, know who the mullahs are, the 12ers? So if you don't know anything about the 12ers, it's a group of guys who they say basically run everything. That they believe that they can, if they spill the blood of what do they call us? Basically, people that aren't them, but they have a name for us. But if they spill the blood of innocents, then they'll pretty much speed up biblical prophecy. People say that it's a myth that these 12ers don't exist. I believe that they do. I've read a lot of stuff on them, but you should definitely go check them out. If you don't know who the 12ers are or the mullahs, check them out. They're like an elite. They're over the militaries in the Middle East. They're over everybody. They basically run everything. It's like the elites of the Middle East, like how we have our banking elites and people that rule us, and those 13 families, if you want to call them 13 families. Yeah, our NGO. Chuck says our NGO money. That's what the 12ers do. So they and don't get me wrong, there's also a sect of they say Jews or whatever that also believe that, and it's called self-fulfilling prophecy. They believe that if they wash the world in the blood of their enemies, then they'll speed up biblical prophecy. But if you know anything about any of these groups I'm reading about, then you also know that certain government likes to create an enemy and place them in certain areas like they do propped up governments. So it says Joe Truzman, a social media user and security expert, noticed the video and added subtitles to it. He says that it, quote, shows the fighters as a short distance away from Golan Heights. The fighters say their final target is in the White Mountain, which is the Golan Heights, and is being held by Israel. The White Mountain is in Hermon, and it is not clear when the video was shot. There has been snow on the Hermon this year, but it may have been in the spring or years ago. The unit has operated in Syria for several years, but the claim that they want to target Israel is new and a part of growing Israel-Iran tensions. And Syrian regime media outlet Sana accused Israel of airstrikes over Syria on Sunday night. And I read that article in the past. So they're threatening Iran. I did a video called 2020, the year of conflict. With all this crap that's going on, man, I definitely think we're headed there. So this is funny, because I have the link in the description to, if you guys don't know this, Space Force, their new home is Colorado. And they also just made their website public. I'll show it to you after this article, but this article says, direct threat to peace. China raises alarm as U.S. Space Force receives first funding. It says China has condemned the inauguration of the newest branch of the U.S. military, the Space Force, describing its creation as a threat to peace that endangers global stability. Foreign Ministry spokesman Jin Shang told reporters on Monday that Beijing was, quote, deeply concerned and resolutely opposed to the Space Force, which received its first funding after U.S. President Donald Trump signed the annual military budget last week. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said Washington's new military branch sets a dangerous precedent for the militarization of outer space. The specific U.S. sanctions are a serious violation of the international consensus on the peaceful use of outer space, undermine global strategic balance and stability, and pose a direct threat to peace and security in outer space. He called on the international community to, quote, adopt a cautious and responsible approach to space in order to prevent it from becoming a conflict zone. In a ceremony marking the force's official launch, U.S. President Donald Trump said that space is, quote, the world's newest warfighting domain, and that, quote, American superiority in space is absolutely vital. The new military service expands on the work of an already existing space command led by the U.S. Air Force, and Washington said that the Space Force will comprise of around 16,000 Air Force and civilian personnel. So I did a video, I believe it was the Operation Bluebeam, or Project Bluebeam video that I did. If you're clueless of what's going on, the Space Force, or Space Command, that word was coined in 1997. It's not new. It's always been a part of the Air Force. It's not new. It's like everyone's, oh my God, Donald Trump's insane because he came up with a Space Force. No, he didn't. It's been around, and it's always been part of the U.S. Air Force. I don't know, because Chuck's a veteran. I don't know if it goes any further back than that. But as far as I can find, 1997, that name was coined, and it was, I think, Space Command is what they call it. But here's, and I'm just showing this to you guys. But here's the Space Force website. If anyone wants to check that out, the link's in the description below, and you can check that out. Oh, Chuck says 1964. See, and here's the thing. Like on the Project Bluebeam stuff, right? I did that video, and it went back to like 1923, and they were already projecting holograms in the sky in like in the 1920s. So if you look at the like the little just crappy stuff that they built back then, and then you look at it now, it pretty much looks the same. They just advanced the technology from, you know, the 20s to where we're at now. But I mean, it's like the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So pretty much everything we've already had, we've had it before. We're just, the further we get along in technology, it seems like we're just making better stuff with the resources that we have. But Chuck says 1964. But I do know about Star Wars, and that was in Reagan's time, where he had the Star Wars thing, and Chuck was talking about I know Grateful Gal says Mitchell Hopkins had a deleted now video years ago with laser tech shooting the sun. I know that we have laser tech, and that the new administration just updated the Star Wars stuff where they can shoot laser beams at warheads and kind of get rid of them. Yeah. Sadly. Yeah. But and it may not look, I think a lot of it has to do with everybody's just distracted with everything, that nobody pays attention to anything. So I think just the world around us is one huge distraction, and people just aren't paying attention to it. Whether it's work, stress, home life. I think if they paid attention to it, they would probably be aware, but I don't know. This whole talk about the Anunnaki coming back and fallen angels and all this stuff. I mean, I don't know. What do you think has caused solar flares, Grateful Gal? This article is pretty rad. I mean, I guess what he had was more valuable than gold, but it says, man keeps rock for years hoping it's gold. It turns out to be far more valuable. So in 2015, David Hull was prospecting in Maryborough Regional Park near Melbourne, Australia. Armed with a metal detector, he discovered something out of the ordinary, a very heavy reddish rock resting in some yellow clay. Oh, CERN? Yeah, you should look up that gun that they're building right up the road from CERN. Check that one out. It'll blow your mind. I posted a link to it on I think it was the Kingsman on Facebook. They have this gigantic it's not a rail gun, but it shoots like so this dark matter that they're gathering at CERN, it shoots just massive beam of light out of this huge gun that they've got buried under the ground. They open this dome and it shoots this huge beam out. I don't know what they intend to use it for. This article says he took it home and tried everything to open it, and there was a gold nugget inside the rock. After all, Maryborough is the Goldfields region where Australia gold rush peaked in the 19th century. Said to crack open his fine hole, tried a rock saw, an angle grinder, a drill, even putting the thing in acid, but not even a sledgehammer could make it crack. That's because he was trying so hard to open was it not a gold nugget. As he found out years later, it was a rare meteorite. Is there a picture? There's not a picture back. He said in a quote, it had this sculpted dimple look to it. Melbourne Museum geologist Dermot Henry told the Sydney Morning Herald. This was formed when they come through the atmosphere and they were melting on the outside, and the atmosphere sculpts them. Unable to open the quote rock, but still intrigued, Hull took the meteorite into Melbourne Museum to be identified. Oh yeah, there's a picture of it down here. It says, I've looked at a lot of rocks that people think are meteorites, Henry told 10 Daily. In fact, after 37 years of working at the museum and examining thousands of rock, Henry explained only 2 of the offerings have ever turned out to be real meteorites. So there's the rock there. If you saw a rock on Earth like this and you picked it up, it shouldn't be that heavy, another Melbourne Museum geologist, Bill Birch, told the Sydney Morning Herald. Researchers have recently published a scientific paper describing the 4.6 billion-year-old meteorite, which they called Maryborough, after the town near where it was found. It's a huge 17 kilogram or 37.5 pounds, and after using a diamond saw to cut off a small slice, they discovered its composition has a high percentage of iron, making it a H5 ordinary chondrite. Once open, you can also see the tiny crystallized droplets of metallic minerals throughout it, called chondrules. Meteorites provide the cheapest form of space exploration. They transport us back in time, providing clues to the age, formation, and chemistry of our solar system, including Earth, Henry explained. Some provided a glimpse at a deep interior of our planet. In some meteorites, there is stardust, even older than our solar system, which shows us how stars form and evolve to create elements of the periodic table. Other rare meteorites contain organic molecules such as amino acids, the building blocks of life. Although the researchers don't know yet where the meteorite came from and how long it may have been on Earth, they do have some guesses. Our solar system was once a spinning pile of dust and chondrite rocks. Eventually, gravity pulled a lot of this material together into planets, but the leftovers mostly ended up on a huge asteroid belt. This particular meteorite most probably comes out of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and has been nudged out of there by some asteroids smashing into each other. Then one day it smashed into Earth, Henry explained to 10 Daily. Carbon dating suggests the meteorite has been on Earth between 100 and 1,000 years, and there's been a number of meteorite sightings between 1889 and 1951 that could correspond to its arrival on our planet. Researchers argue that the Maryborough meteorite is much rarer than gold. It's one of only 17 meteorites ever recorded in the Australian state of Victoria, and it's the second largest chondritic mass after the huge 55-kilogram specimen identified in 2003. This is only the 17th meteorite found in Victoria, whereas there's been thousands of gold nuggets found, Henry told 10 Daily. Looking at the chain of events, it's quiet, you might say, astronomical, it being discovered at all. It's not even the first meteorite to take a few years to make it to a museum. In particularly amazing story we covered last year, one space rock took 80 years, 2 owners, and a stint as a doorstop before making it to a museum. Now is probably a good time as any to check your backyard for particularly heavy and hard to break rocks. You might be sitting on a metaphorical gold mine. You got any rusty ass rocks sitting in your backyard? It might belong to or you might have a meteorite or a doorstop that you're using. So this I think is hilarious because I've covered before, all the astronomers are griping because Elon Musk's Starlink satellites are kind of blocking the way for them to see stars at nighttime. So now I guess it's freaking everybody out when they see the band of satellites go by. Everybody thinks it's UFOs. This article says Starlink satellites produce wave of UFO sightings in the U.S. and it's mainly Montana. It says residents in northern Montana reported a string of strange lights dotting the sky that look like UFOs from an alien invasion has turned out to be another consequence of SpaceX Starlink satellites constellation. So they're getting their own name as a constellation. SpaceX launched 60 satellites in orbit back in May and another 60 in November 11th as part of the Starlink satellite constellation, meant to increase satellite internet access. But the reflective satellites are also producing bright trains of lights across the sky, stoking UFO fears for those unaware of the satellites and distracting astronomers. It says the most recent sightings of trains of Starlight satellites occurred over the cities of Browning, Rocky Boy, and Lodgepole in Montana. A resident shared sightings with local news outlets. University of Maryland computer scientist Jen Golbeck pointed out in a tweet that the train could also be visible from Illinois, Iowa, and Michigan this past week. A Starlink constellation launched in May stoked a similar wave of, quote, UFO sightings in Europe. But perhaps more worrisome than a rash of UFO reports, these sightings were distracting astronomers. Gizmodo reported last month that the satellite appeared in images taken by astronomers operating the dark energy camera at Cerro Tololo Observatory in Chile. Approximately 1 in 40 exposures captured the satellite train. Each train of satellites eventually break up as they settle into each individual satellite. Each individual satellite settles into a unique orbit. Okay. Astronomer Cliff Johnson at Northwestern told Gizmodo that at present the satellites are more of an annoyance than a real problem, but may become more of a problem as the number of satellite constellations increase. The batches launched this year are just the first of a project that may lead to 12,000 more satellites developed by 2025. SpaceX announced that they launched another 60 in early 2020, and this past summer, the International Astronomical Union issued a statement urging satellite constellation producers to work with the astronomy community to understand the potential impacts of these satellites and work regulatory agencies to produce rules governing the satellites to minimize those impacts. For what it's worth, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk tweeted that he directed his team to work on reducing the reflectivity of the satellites, but scientists who spoke to National Geographic said they prefer that the conversations occur before the satellite launch. Fixes like simply reducing the reflectivity might not even work for our most sensitive telescopes, according to the New York Times. And the Starlink constellation of satellites could lead to competitors further polluting the night sky with satellite constellations of their own, injecting even more space junk into orbit that we'll eventually have to deal with. All of this to say, if you have seen a streak of lights flashing across the sky, it's probably not aliens, and it's frustrating astronomers around the world. So this is the last article, and this is what the thumbnail has to do with. So apparently, they don't know who's doing this, but I guess they're flying drones all over Colorado, and people are freaked out. So the FAA doesn't know who it is, the Sheriff's Department doesn't know who it is, the military doesn't know who it is, the police department doesn't know who it is. Nobody knows what's going on. Article says, big and bizarre drone mysteries unfolding in rural Colorado. It says the sparse expanses of northeast Colorado have become ground zero for a bizarre mystery surrounding sightings of nighttime coordinated flights of groups of drones. From roughly 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night last week, an estimated 17 drones with 6-foot spans have flown, quote, grid patterns over Phillips County and near its border with neighboring Yuma County, according to Phillips County Sheriff Thomas Elliott. The drones operate at a few hundred feet in the air and were brightly lit with strobing colored and white lights, leaving local residents and those driving through the area baffled. So it goes on to say the Denver Post was first to report on the string of strange sightings. And local law enforcement, the FAA, the DEA, the U.S. Army, and the Air Force have said they have no idea what these aircraft are or who they belong to. The sheriff's office can't explain where the drones are coming from or who is flying them. The estimated size and number of drones makes it unlikely that they are being flown by hobbyists, Under Sheriff William Myers said. On Friday, Myers said he watched 8 of the large drones flying along Yuma County border near the intersection of US 385 and County Road 54 at the same time. A single drone hovered about 25 miles away over the town of Paoli. It didn't move all night, just hovered over the town. And 8 more drones flew over Haxton, about 10 miles down the road of Paoli, Myers said. Overhead, they're probably doing 30 to 40 miles an hour, he said, and they weren't racing or flying around with speed. One resident who spotted a drone last week gave chase, Elliott said, driving behind it about 50 miles an hour, but lost the drone when he ran out of gas in Washington County. The machines fly too high to be heard from the ground, but can be seen by their strobing white lights along with red, blue, and green lights. The way Colorado law is written, none of the statutes fit for harassment or trespassing, Myers said. Colorado hasn't gotten on board with identifying the airspace around the property as the actual premises, so we don't have anything we could charge. The FAA does have rules for drones that weigh less than 55 pounds and require such aircraft to be flown during daylight hours within sight of the pilot, no higher than 400 feet above the ground, and not over people, among other rules. However, pilots can apply and receive waivers from the FAA that exempts the pilots from many of those rules. It's also not clear whether the drones over Phillips and Yuma counties would be governed by those regulations, and a drone the size of the ones spotted over the counties likely would weigh more than 55 pounds, Moss said. That means the drone operator would be flying commercially and would likely need a, quote, manned aviator and actual pilot, Moss said. Chuck says the Colorado Boys Drone Club. I know this is what I'm saying. Like, don't they have like? I think I've read an article on it before. They have anti-drone weaponry, so they can shoot nets around them. And I think they even train like hawks or some crap to capture drones. But you're talking about a drone with a 6-foot wingspan. That's longer than I am. Well, it's about the same height I am. But they're flying. I mean, what did it say here? The amount of them is what I think is kind of baffling them. "17 drones with 6-foot spans, and they're flying in sync with each other. And they think whoever's doing this it's either for counterintelligence, surveillance, something's going on. But I don't know why they haven't. Like, wouldn't you call in the feds to see what's going on? Because I know in like Dallas-Fort Worth area, they have the police department around there has drones that they use to patrol certain areas that cops can't necessarily get to. So like big park areas, things of that nature. But I don't understand why they wouldn't call in somebody else to come and figure it out if obviously they don't know what's going on. Yeah, 6 foot wide. Grateful Gal says 6 foot wide. Hope they're good, guys. There was also, and I didn't read this article, they're also trying to put a mandate out there where people have to put, I guess, tracking chips inside the drones that they buy or the drones that they build, so the FAA is cautious of what's flying around. And plus, I think certain states have airspace rules. You can't fly them a certain height, but it looks like these dudes are just doing whatever the hell they want to. And then the one that just, like, I think it's weird that one just hovered above a town all night long. It just hovered there. When it was hovering, why didn't you go shoot it out of the air with a shotgun or something? If the military's not claiming it and you're a police officer, go shoot it out of the sky. I mean, I would. He goes on to say, Elliott said Monday that the sheriff's office has received 9 phone calls about the drones since last week. He said residents no longer need a call to report a simple sighting of the drones. We just want to know if one lands, if we can get our hands on it, or if they see someone operating them. That's what we're looking for now, he said. We know they exist. He says, I think people will wonder why there is no video that we know of these sightings, and most amateur video shot of lights in the sky at night has very little value. But regardless, you have to remember that this is happening in very sparsely populated areas after dark. If it was occurring near an urban area, I think the lack of video would be a bit troubling, but in this case, I don't find it to be, especially considering the level of law enforcement knowledge of these events. People seeing lights in the sky that they don't understand the origin of happens often, but this case seems to be far more consistent over a short time span as something that could be easily blown off. Once again, the fact that law enforcement is well aware of it and discussing it as a fact is also telling. This all begs the question, what's going on in this remote section of Colorado? It goes on to say, based strictly on descriptions conveyed, it sounds like someone or some group is testing a broad area surveillance capability with lower-end autonomous drones. This could include something as simple as having a group fly a series of planned routes and return with information gathered via autopilot. And by doing so, a group of small, relatively inexpensive drones can cover a large area quickly instead of single, far more expensive assets that could take more time and offer less redundancy. Such a capability could be used for search and rescue mapping and general intelligence gathering. This also doesn't require man-in-the-loop control that would necessitate line-of-sight connectivity, and still it is really flat terrain with endless farmland in the area where the sightings occurred, which means line of sight connectivity would be maximized, especially with the help of large aerial or small tower. But the grid pattern nature of these flights that the sheriff describes point to a coordinated and automated flight plan for the drones. Somebody's programming them is what they think to fly specific areas. See, and that's what I thought. Grateful Gal says, or so they say, alphabet agencies, and that's what I'm thinking, because the only one that's not on the list there is, the one that starts with a C and ends with an A. That's when I first saw this, and I was thinking that, well, all these other agencies haven't claimed it, but then, and here's the funny thing, I just mentioned this with the Space Force thing. We know that Colorado is home of Space Force now, so could it be an outside entity, people, operatives for another country that are in our country that are doing reconnaissance for this? But they say that it's in a specific area. They even have the maps. So, I mean, this is what's weird about it to me, and that they can't figure out what's going on. It says the airspace where this is occurring is particularly desolate, as well as making ideally suited for such a task, but the flights are not legally occurring, which makes the whole affair quite suspicious. The fact that the activity is happening after sundown is even more intriguing, and adds to the notion that whoever is doing this knows it is outside of the bounds of the FAA regulations. And that's another reason why I think it's probably somebody that knows the rules, knows the laws. Or drop-offs. 6-footers could carry things. And that was another thing I was thinking, but I don't think that there's any, if they could be dropping, drugs or things to prisons and stuff, but I don't even think there's anything around there. From what they're saying, there's not even a bunch of people that are around there. It says, in addition, this would be very challenging to trace these aircraft back to their place of origin or point flight termination, and drones could fly the majority of their missions with lights on and turn them off during launch and recovery. With very little ambient light, they would be at all undetectable to the naked eye. Also remember that drones this size can take off from very small areas, so it's not like a runway is needed or anything like that. As such, they can originate from nearly anywhere. So are they flying from outside this area and then they're appearing after they turn their lights on? So if you're watching this, these are the maps of the areas of where, I guess these brownout areas here are where the sightings have occurred. It says this is basically the area where the sightings are occurring. It's largely uncontrolled airspace with a very sparse population. Look at, but it's like everywhere. It's not like just one area. These things are flying everywhere, and it looks like to be miles apart from each other, and they're just popping up all of a sudden. It says here you can see the relationship of the area of activity in relation to the Denver and nearby Nebraska. That's crazy. It says the reality is that the individual or smart group with some resources can do this. It doesn't need to be a federal agency, the military, or some defense or aviation contractor. Although it all sounds relatively innocuous, it is probably yet another sign of the potential threat is small. Commercially available unmanned aircraft pose. If the grid pattern reports are accurate and autonomous waypoint navigation is being used by these drones, it can be posited that similar basic concepts of operation were used in the game-changing attack on Saudi oil facilities in September. Furthermore, drones of this size can carry out relevant payload of deadly explosives instead of surveillance or electronic warfare gear. 17 drones flying at once that can surveil a broad area could be re-rolled by nefarious actors to strike 17 pinpoint fixed targets nearly simultaneously, or swarm against a single high value one from multiple directions. And that was the other thing that I was thinking, was all of this right here. Basically that whole paragraph. It says this is the same drum I've been beating for years, and eventually this threat will materialize in the continental United States as it has overseas. With that in mind, this type of event, which we've only seen more which we'll only see more of in the future, shouldn't be treated as just something interesting curiosity. There is no need to panic, but the mystery behind these aircraft should be solved, and whoever's doing this should receive some sort of penalty for executing these types of operations outside the FAA regulations, even if there isn't a dark agenda behind the activity. Some will say this is an overreaction, but those are probably the same people that laughed when some of us started warning about potential threat of small drones being used unlawfully and for very negative purposes years ago. Regardless, a skyborne mystery is afoot in Colorado, and it will be interesting to see if the flights continue if the description of these sightings holds up. We will continue to update about this, but I mean, it's crazy that it's even going on. So, like always, there's just been in Colorado is questionable. See, I mean, I'm interested in knowing what anyone else thinks about it, because all of this stuff, the whole article, like, if it's been going on that long, how come you haven't done any police work to find out who it is? What if it is somebody plotting? What if it's somebody getting, land surveillance, or I mean, it could be anything, but I don't think, people are smart enough. You can buy the supplies off Amazon and other hobby stores to build pretty big drones. But, I mean, there's got to be something surrounding it, I think, at least. Just a second. But as always, I mean, if you guys ever want to call in, the number it scrolls across the bottom of the screen here, 1-408-638-0968, and the meeting ID is 534-233-4758, and you can also send articles to that email address, kingsmanreport2019@gmail.com. And like I said, this is a live podcast, so I'll post the link to this podcast after I get it edited. I'll post the link in the description, as well as all the links to these articles that I read tonight, if you guys are interested in any of those. Well, thank you, Grateful Gal. But like I said, you guys want to call in ever, you want to go to the Kingsman Report on that website, anchor.fm/Kingsman Report. You can become a contributor, monthly contributor, and support the podcast. And if you want to leave a voice message, you can go there too, and you can click that button right here. And you can leave a voice message for the next podcast, and I can edit those in. You can go to the support button here, and then all the links are right here. And all the links are also in the About section. So all the links to the socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, my website, all those are in the About section of my YouTube channel. You guys can check that out. Marf sent you? Like Marfugel sent you? Look, dude, I love Marfugel. I always pay those guys homage. Just don't tell them to get into the podcast game, or I'll be out. But no, I always pay homage to Marf, Adam from Marfugel. I pay homage to him. Dabu7, a lot of these guys, like, and a lot of people, if you're just listening to this, I wrote for a lot of different places. I went under a different name, obviously, but I wrote articles for, I'm not even going to name some of the places I wrote articles for. I got in trouble writing articles in a small town in Colorado, Kansas, southeast Kansas, whenever I started investigating hang on just a second. I'll grab my credentials. So I was investigating a like small town corruption, and I got thrown in jail because I was exposing some stuff that was going on in that jail there, and I got out of my podcast because I was exposing on my old podcast, and they locked me in jail. And if I told you what they did to me while I was incarcerated, you would think those things would never even happen to a citizen of this country. It got so bad that the Kansas Bureau of Investigations had to step in, and I had to delete all my podcasts. It was bad. I mean, it was traumatizing to say the least. It gave me PTSD, but it was crazy. But aside from that, like, if you could tell, my brain goes 100-mile-a-minute. So when people were like in the chat and I'm trying to answer questions, I can reference a lot of things, but my mind is constantly like going off of a bunch of information that people are talking about there. If needed, do a sounds like. What do you mean by that? No, it was crazy. They gave me a felony there. It's ridiculous. The sheriff is now, I think he's suspended. The judge is under investigation. The jail administrator has been fired. A whole bunch of stuff happened there because the Kansas Bureau of Investigation stepped in. It got out of control, but it exposed a lot of stuff that was going on there. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation was very nice. But what I want to do next, I'm trying to get a hold of him because I did a video on. Take that off there. I did a video on Thus Always the Tyrants. Okay, and I'm in Oklahoma, so I'm most definitely pro Second Amendment, which I've lost that constitutional right because of my felony. But you know, they're dealing with all the crap that's going on in Virginia with their Democratic Socialist governor there, and I'm trying to get an interview with those guys from the Virginia militia. We've been kind of talking back and forth because I want to get. I'm not promoting violence on any of those issues. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but I think that you have a God-given right to protect yourself, and I think that those guys need to. Yeah, Grateful Gal says they're good people. I mean, and the guys that I've talked to there, you know, and some of them have commented on that video. Look, they have a God-given right to protect themselves, and I think that that's absolutely what they need to do, is just be able to protect themselves. I don't think that we need to have anyone, any government officials, you know, we had the Second Amendment was put in place against a tyrannical government in case they try to do stuff like this, and I tell everybody, everyone goes in and they disarm the people before they have something that they planned to do, whether it's, you know, I'm not even going to get into all the stuff that's coming. If you watch Marfugel, he's coming out with an article about all the stuff that's coming out that he can't even talk about on YouTube. You guys gotta pay attention to him because he's got connects with people. But yeah, they got plans. We got an Ebola inoculation that's coming out, and they're trying to press that where they're probably going to try to force it on everybody. I've talked about the ID 2020 Alliance. I've talked about all of that stuff, where they're forcing, you know, the chips in homeless people, and it's just absolutely crazy. But no, I definitely will, Grateful Gal. I'll keep you posted on what's going on in Virginia because they're kind of around here. I know Dex is in Georgia. He's kind of close over there, but no, I'm definitely going to cover it. That video kind of went crazy. I mean, it's not like hitting thousands of views, but it got some people's attention. But definitely, I'm going to keep praying for those people there. Like I said, if you guys are interested, go to anchor.fm/The Kingsman Report, and you can listen to the podcast there. I think this will be 39th episode that I've done, and I'll put this link for this in the description below, and you guys can check that out there. And as always, man, you guys stay up, pray for one another, love one another. You know, be safe. New Year's is coming up. for those that do that. New Year's is coming up. Shabbat Shalom to those who keep the Sabbath tonight. And, if you are new to the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell people about it. It's just, starting up. So, grateful, y'all. Thank you for commenting and being part of it. Chuck, as always. Chuck's #1, man. Chuck is always here, which I appreciate. But you guys stay up and take care of each other. And until next time, I see you guys. I'm live Sunday through Friday at 7 p.m. I try to go on before Marf. I try to go on. I think Dabu just went live while I was live. But anyways, we're all kind of doing the same thing. I cover what they don't. I try not to cover what they cover, and vice versa. I know Dabu's going to cover a lot of what Marv said he's about to cover, but I try to kind of stay outside of that. So you guys take care of each other. Until next time, Yah bless and shalom. Hello.
Don't forget to listen Sunday through Friday at 7 p.m.